Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, مساء, has addressed a message to the Algerian people on the eve of the 71st anniversary of the outbreak of the glorious War of National Liberation of November 1st, 1954. The Algerian people will commemorate tomorrow, Saturday, the 71st anniversary of the outbreak of the glorious Revolution of November 1st, 1954, an epic event that enshrined the sovereignty of national decision-making and the right of the Algerian people to self-determination and independence. The Speaker of the Council of the Nation, Azzouz Nasri, has recalled that in Algeria the great interest shown by the President of the Republic, مساء, in national memory and his commitment to ensuring that the new and victorious Algeria is inspired by the doctrine of November. And on behalf of the A3+ Group, Algeria has condemned in the strongest terms the violations and atrocities committed by the Rapid Support Forces RSF in El Fasher, calling for action and accountability. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First in our news, the President of the Republic, مساء, affirmed today that loyalty to the sacrifices of the glorious martyrs is the compass guiding Algeria in this critical phase towards consolidating the foundations of the emerging national state and towards fostering a unifying national spirit. In a message addressed to the Algerian people on the eve of the 71st anniversary of the outbreak of the glorious War of National Liberation, the President of the Republic said, "On this anniversary, as we celebrate with pride the glories of generations who fought relentless battles throughout Algeria, we do so to make loyalty to their sacrifices a source of strength and determination." The President added that this loyalty is also a compass towards fostering a unifying national spirit among sincere patriots and active, vibrant forces, especially young people, to ensure the country's resilience in the face of the volatile situations in our regional environment and the acute conflicts and cutting in international relations that the world is witnessing today. This will be achieved by relying on our own capabilities through a liberated and wealth-generating economic performance and on the awareness and patriotism of the sons and daughters of Algeria who on this occasion stand as proud builders of the present and the future, following in the footsteps of our righteous martyrs whose pure souls we remember with reverence. We are driven, he went on to say, by the will of the sincere or those who work for the advancement of the nation and the service of the people. And the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, Minister of National Defense, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has sent his sincere condolences to the family of General Ben Amr Hassan, Inspector of the Special Forces of the Land Forces Command, who died on Thursday, assuring them of his deep sympathy. The Deputy Minister to the Minister of National Defense, Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Army General Saeed Shingriha, has also offered his sincere condolences and expressed his deep sympathy to the family of General Hassan Ben Omar, Inspector of the Special Forces of the Land Forces Command, who passed away on Thursday following a sudden illness. The Algerian people will commemorate tomorrow, Saturday, the 71st anniversary of the outbreak of the glorious Revolution of November 1st, 1954, an epic event that enshrined the sovereignty of national decision-making and the right of the Algerian people to self-determination and independence, principles that the Algerian state has placed at the heart of its founding texts and which serve as the guiding principles for its domestic and foreign policy. Said Boughazi has more details in this report.
The proclamation of November 1st, 1954 is the main reference for all the constitutions of the Algerian Republic since the restoration of national sovereignty. In the preamble to the 2020 Constitution, which begins with the words "The Algerian people are a free people and are determined to remain so," it is expressly stated that November 1st, 1954 and its founding proclamation were the keys to its destiny and the culmination of a long resistance to attacks on its culture, values, and fundamental components of its identity. It also mentions that the quest for the people's support made it possible to achieve decisive victories marked by the recovery of its sovereignty, the recovery of its national wealth, and the construction of a state at its exclusive service, as well as the strengthening of the legitimacy of the state exercising its powers in the service of national independence and free from any external pressure. Revolutionary doctrines rooted in the history of the Algerian people's struggle, state sovereignty, and independence of decision-making are two fundamental principles that govern all national development policies and set the main milestones for Algeria's international relations and its positions on just causes around the world. With this in mind, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, reaffirmed during his last visit to the headquarters of the Ministry of National Defense the state's determination to preserve its sovereignty and the independence of its positions through a strong economy and army, stressing that Algeria's honorable positions as a fervent defender of oppressed peoples around the world and their right to self-determination required political and economic independence.
And the Speaker of the Council of the Nation, Azouz Nasri, has recalled in Algiers the great interest shown by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, in national memory and his commitment to ensuring that the new and victorious Algeria is inspired by the doctrine of November. In a speech delivered at the end of a plenary session devoted to oral questions, in the presence of members of the government, Azouz Nasri expressed the gratitude of the Algerian government and people for the sacrifices and heroic deeds of the Shuhada, Mujahideen and Mujahidat, who paid a heavy price to liberate our beloved homeland from the yoke of a colonial settlement that engaged in all forms of torture, massacres, and genocide, sacrifices that led to a resounding victory and the independence of Algeria, he said. The Speaker of the Council of the Nation also underlined that the commemoration of the 71st anniversary of the outbreak of the glorious November Revolution was a renewed opportunity to remember with pride and deference the great sacrifices made by the Mujahideen, and Shuhada. The Speakers of the Council of the Nation and the National People's Assembly, respectively, Azouz Nasri and Brahim Boughali, visited on Thursday evening the Algiers International Book Fair, SILA, which is being held at the Pain Maritime Palace and of exhibitions here in Algiers. On this occasion, Mr. Nasri and Mr. Boughali visited several stands, including the Joint Council of the Nation, APN, stand. Algeria's vision for personal data protection was presented on Thursday by the National Authority for Personal Data Protection, ANDPD, at the Lisbon 2025 Forum on Artificial Intelligence and Global Governance, according to a statement from the authority. During the forum, themed Artificial Intelligence and Global Governance, Rights, Representativeness and Preparedness, the ANDDP representative presented Algeria's vision for personal data protection while emphasizing the importance of the state attaches to this area in the face of the challenges posed by artificial intelligence and its determination to ensure and secure exchange of personal data. He also affirmed Algeria's determination to use artificial intelligence to promote digital transformation and strengthen digital governance based on an approach founded on scientific research and innovation. The proceedings of the meeting of the 36th session of the Council of Arab Ministers in charge of environment held from 26 to 30 October in Nouakchott, Mauritania, were crowned by the adoption of a joint decision that hails Algeria's experience in the fight against desertification through the Green Dam project and stipulates to generalize it at the Arab level, said a statement from the Ministry of Environment and Quality of Life. In a speech delivered on this occasion, the Minister of Environment and Quality of Life, Kautar Kriko, presented Algeria's efforts to promote the environmental practice of and strengthen the ecological balance in implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, stressing that all development achievements in Algeria are based on the balance between community requirements and climate variations, particularly at the international level, while adapting its policy in this framework. The chairwoman of the High Authority for Transparency, Prevention and Combating Corruption, Salima Mousserati, has taken part in Mpumalanga, South Africa, in the G20 ministerial meeting on combating corruption, according to a statement from the authority. This ministerial meeting, which follows the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting, aims to discuss ways to strengthen global efforts in the area of integrity and anti-corruption and to consolidate international cooperation with relevant organizations. Now, the A3+ group in the Security Council has condemned in the strongest terms the violations and atrocities committed by the Rapid Support Forces RSF in El Fasher, capital of the province of North Darfur in Sudan, while calling for dialogue to establish peace in the country. During a meeting of the Council devoted to the situation in Sudan held at the request of Algeria and several other countries, the A3+ group made up of Algeria, Somalia, Sierra Leone and Guyana denounced in a statement read by the permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations, Amr bin Jama, the takeover of El Fasher by the RSF after more than 18 months of an inhumane siege. Let's listen to Mr. bin Jama.
The Rapid Support Forces have seized control of El Fasher after more than 18 months of an inhumane siege marked by starvation, suffering and despair. This deeply worrying development is a brazen defiance of this Council Resolution 2736 that demanded last year the lifting of the siege on El Fasher by the RSF. It represents also a dangerous step toward the fragmentation of Sudan.
The group also condemned the attacks carried out for ethnic reasons, underlining that the violations perpetrated in El Fasher are the results of months of inaction and negative approach from the international community, evoking the death of 460 patients and their companions during the bombing of the Saudi maternity hospital, as well as other crimes and violations committed by the RSF. The group recalled the Security Council has the responsibility to protect the civilians in Sudan and must intensify its efforts to achieve this objective, calling for full accountability and use of all the mechanisms available so that the Rapid Support Forces are brought to justice.
El Fasher is bleeding. El Fasher is calling for justice. El Fasher is calling for a strong reaction from the international community. Can the deliberate slaughter of innocent ever be a path to legitimacy? Is it how authority is gained through terror and annihilation? This Council cannot and must not remain silent. These atrocities cannot be met with indifference and procedural caution. The RSF have to be held accountable for their violations and atrocities. Accountability is a strong deterrent, and this very Council must ensure that the RSF does not continue to kill and brutalize innocent civilians with impunity.
Shifting now to the file of Western Sahara, where Sahrawi human rights activist Mohammed Al-Baykam has affirmed that the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination and independence is a non-negotiable principle, stressing that all attempts by the Moroccan occupation to erase the Sahrawi entity are doomed to failure. In an article entitled How the Major Powers Abandon Justice in Western Sahara, published in the daily newspaper L'Humanité, the Sahrawi activist stressed that international silence in the face of the continuing occupation constitutes an and explicit complicity with the policy of fait accompli, vigorously denouncing the double standards of those who claim to defend human rights while turning a blind eye to a people deprived of their most fundamental rights. Said Bougazi has more.
Mohammed El-Baykam pointed out that this complacent attitude not only threatens the Sahrawi cause but also deeply undermines the credibility of the international system based on respect for the law and the sovereignty of peoples. Turning a blind eye to the daily violations in the occupied territories and the deprivation of the Sahrawi people of their natural resources constitutes a blatant violation of all relevant UN resolutions, he denounced. The activists deplored the attitude of the major powers, which give priority to economic agreements and political compromises that legitimize the illegal exploitation of the territory's resources instead of putting pressure on Morocco to end the occupation and allow a free and fair referendum. In this respect, he denounced an opportunistic approach that turns principles into empty slogans and shows how international law loses all meaning when it clashes with economic or geopolitical interests. El-Baykam also warned that the Moroccan propaganda machine is working tirelessly to mislead international public opinion by spreading the image of supposed development while the Sahrawi people live under blockade, discrimination and repression, subjected to policies aimed at erasing their national culture and depriving the younger generations of their memory and identity. He concluded his article by stating that the current period represents a decisive moment and a real test for global conscience. Either the international community rallies to the principles of international law and allows the Sahrawi people to exercise their legitimate right to self-determination and independence, or it continues its silence, which is tantamount to encouraging the occupation and justifying its violations.
And this came as the UN Security Council is set to vote later today on a US draft resolution on Western Sahara, which also calls for a one-year extension of the UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, and requests that the UN Secretary General submit a strategic review of the mission's future mandate within 6 months. And in the Middle East now, the UN Refugee Agency, UNRWA, has stated that it continues to ensure its essential humanitarian role in the Gaza Strip, despite the restrictions imposed by the Zionist entity in violation of the ceasefire agreement in force since October 10. The details with our colleague Saad Bougazi.
In a message published on social networks, the agency indicated that despite the restrictions imposed by the Zionist entity in the Palestinian enclave, its schools still serve as temporary shelters for thousands of displaced families, their classrooms being transformed into emergency shelters. UNRWA specified that its teams of social workers pursue the provision of protection and psychological support services, helping the victims to find a dignified life despite the losses suffered. It added that more than 12,000 employees of the agency in Gaza continue to work every day in the sectors of education, health, and humanitarian aid, stressing that each course provided, each medical consultation, and each distribution of water testifies to the determination of its staff to fulfill its mission despite the difficulties. UNRWA indicated Wednesday in a report that its staff is still not welcome in the occupied Palestinian territories. Access to the occupied Palestinian territories, the Gaza Strip, and the occupied West Bank, including East al-Quds, is prohibited to any international personnel of UNRWA. This measure follows the adoption on 28 October 2024 by the Parliament of the Zionist entity of 2 laws prohibiting UNRWA's operations, the report noted, observing that since the end of January 2025, the Zionist entity has not granted either a visa or entry permit for international staff of the Office for the Occupied Palestinian Territories, including Gaza.
And with this, we come to the end of our news bulletin for today. We leave you now with our weekly programs by my colleague Mariam Barshi and then by my colleague Jamal Silmani. As for me, I just wanted to remind you that you can follow our programs on our official Facebook page, our official account on X platform, and through our My Algerian Radio app, downloadable on smartphones and cars. With this, we come to the end of it. We'll meet you again tomorrow. Thank you. To travel back in time and learn about the most prominent events that marked human history, no need for a time machine. Echoes of Time with our colleague Mariam Bershi is your only address. A program broadcast to you every week on Radio Algeria International.
Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to this new episode of Echoes of Time. Today we begin a short series dedicated to one of the most transformative currents in human history, the Enlightenment. Over the coming episodes we will journey from Europe to America and finally to the Middle East, tracing how ideas of reason, liberty and progress reshaped societies and the human mind itself. Our first stop, Europe, where the dawn of a new age began to glow across the 17th and 18th centuries. The Enlightenment did not appear suddenly. It was born from centuries of questioning, a slow awakening after the long night of dogma and absolute rule. In the 60,000, Europe stood at a crossroads. The Renaissance had reignited curiosity. The scientific revolution had begun to challenge the old order. Galileo, Descartes and Newton were defining or redefining truth, not as something decreed by authority, but as something discovered through reason and evidence. This new attitude toward knowledge marked a shift from faith to inquiry, from obedience to thought. It was a quiet rebellion, one waged not with weapons, but with words and ideas. By the early 18th centuries, the movement had the name Les Lumières, the Enlightenment. In Paris, London, Berlin and Edinburgh, a generation of thinkers emerged. Voltaire, Diderot, Montesquieu, Rousseau and Kant, among others. They met in salons hosted by women of intellect and influence spaces where noblemen, artists and scientists gathered to debate the meaning of liberty and justice. Here our ideas crossed borders faster than armies. Voltaire's wit cut through superstition. Montesquieu analyzed power and balance, shaping modern concepts of constitutional government. Diderot assembled the encyclopedia, an audacious attempt to gather all human knowledge, to replace ignorance with learning. And Rousseau dared to proclaim that man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains. For them reason was sacred. It was not the enemy of faith, but its equal, the faculty through which humanity might perfect itself. The Enlightenment was more than a philosophy. It was a project of emancipation. It sought to free humanity from fear of kings, of priests, of ignorance. Printing presses multiplied ideas. Pamphlets and treatises circulated through Europe's cafes and academies. Ordinary people, artisans, merchants, even farmers began to read about natural rights and social contracts. The idea that knowledge is power took on a new meaning. The educated mind could question, resist and transform. But power never yields easily. Monarchs watched with both fascination and alarm as thinkers began to question divine authority. Some rulers, like Frederick the Great of Prussia or Catherine the Great of Russia, tried to adopt Enlightenment ideas without surrendering their thrones. They called themselves enlightened despots. Others silenced dissent from censorship or exile. Still the spot could not be contained. Man's relationship with religion was complex. Many thinkers sought to reconcile reasons with belief, arguing that understanding the world was itself a form of reverence. But others, like Voltaire, turned their pens against the abuses of organized religion. His famous cry, "Écrasez l'infâme," or "Crush the infamous thing," referred not to faith itself, but to intolerance and fanaticism. This tension gave birth to deism, the idea of creator, who designed the universe but allowed it to run according to natural laws. It was a compromise between science and spirituality, between Newton's physics and the Psalms of faith. At the heart of the Enlightenment lay a question that would reshape politics forever. What gives rulers the right to govern? John Locke in England argued that authority comes not from divine right, but from the consent of the governed. If a ruler violated that trust, the people had a right to resist. Jean-Jacques Rousseau expanded on that idea. He imagined a social contract where each individual, by surrendering a small part of freedom to the collective, gains protection and justice in return. It was a radical vision, one that would echo in revolutions and constitutions for centuries to come. Though male philosophers dominated the public stage, women played a crucial yet often forgotten role. Figures like Madame Geoffrin and Madame de Staël created intellectual spaces where dialogue thrived. Writers such as Mary Wollstonecraft, with her Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1792, challenged the very foundation of social inequality. She argued that women's inferiority was not natural but constructed, the result of education denied. Her voice marked one of the earliest calls for gender equality, echoing through centuries of feminist thought. By the late 18th century, the Enlightenment had become more than a philosophy, it was a force. In France, its ideals initiated revolution. Liberty, equality, fraternity became a rallying cry against monarchy and privilege. In America, across the ocean, those same principles were about to inspire a new nation. The pens of Jefferson, Madison, and Franklin would translate European ideas into political reality. But within Europe itself, the Enlightenment's legacy remained complex, both glorious and tragic. It paved the way for democracy and human rights, but also for the arrogance of believing that reason alone could solve every problem. Still, its impact endures in every modern constitution, in every classroom, in every scientific experiment, and in the very notion of progress. In Europe was above all a conversation between past and future, between faith and reason, between those who ruled and those who dreamed of freedom. It asked humanity to look inward, to think, to question, and to believe in the power of the mind. In our next episode, we will cross the Atlantic to explore the Enlightenment in America, how those European ideas took root in a new world and shaped the birth